Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the Football Friday podcast. Matt Catrillo, Ian Hunter here with you this week. A little bit of a hiatus we took there for about 2 weeks or so, but we are back talking all things NFL. Ian, what's going on?
Oh, living the dream, man. Just one day at a time, nice and easy. It's the offseason, right?
It is, yes. Everybody, I think, is saying that at this point. But as the OTAs kick off for most, if not all, the NFL teams by now, as we continue to count down to begin the 2017 season, I'm feeling the same way. Taking it day by day, but living the dream, man.
That's well, all you can pretty much do. We're in that nice little, time where you won't have any draft tape to watch. We're just kind of doing our thing.
That's exactly right, and we're going to start that today, Ian, with some reaction from the NFL owners' meetings in Chicago. A lot to recap there with overtime and the excessive celebration.
In front of your computer?
What's that?
You have a leaf in front of your computer?
I think I do. I'm sitting at my kitchen/dining room table here recording this, and there are flowers here that we got from my fiance's wedding shower this past weekend. I'll move that out of the way. There we go.
Okay. Just I was wondering where we were recording this week.
Yes. No, I'm all set now, and in my new apartment here in beautiful Sunbury, Pennsylvania. But yes. Yeah, so we're going to start off with the owners' meetings and recap all that with the excessive celebration changes, the overtime changes, all that stuff. A little controversy, if you can call it that, with the Super Bowl for Super Bowl 55 with LA, with the stadium issues there. And we're going to talk as we start with OTAs, a couple of big-name players are sitting out. We'll discuss about that a little bit. And we're going to start a new series on the show that we haven't really done before. Even Alex and I really didn't do this a whole lot when we first started the show a few years ago. It's kind of going by division, post-free agency, post-draft, and kind of see where everybody's at as we get ready to head towards training camp in the next couple months or so. So first off, we're going to go to what we saw in the NFL owner meetings in Chicago this past weekend. And let's start with overtime, as that's probably the biggest rule change that came out of this, as it is now changed from a 15-minute quarter to a 10-minute quarter. Now, the league said they did this basically to continue towards their efforts of player safety. But when I look at this, Ian, 5 minutes to me doesn't make a whole lot of a difference. And two, you're now opening up a whole new can of worms when it comes to the standings, because you are more than likely going to have more ties, because now both teams having a chance to have the football first, unless somebody scores a touchdown or a safety, or we know the rules by now. Then if you take 5 minutes off, there's going to be way more ties, which could make things more exciting, probably. But it's definitely going to make things a lot more complicated, and I really don't know if this helps the product at all. If anything, I think it's a detriment to the product at this point, not only for the game, but I think for the players themselves. So
I don't know if it's so much a detriment. I don't know how much of a big problem this is going to be for the standing. Most of the NFL games don't go to overtime, and I don't know. It was a weird, strange rule that maybe they are concerned about the guys playing, but you want teams to win or lose. There's no excitement over a team tying. It's a giant letdown.
And especially when this is such an emotional sport and so much goes into it week in and week out, to me, you just have to find a way to make sure that there's a winner and a loser at the end of each game. I just think that the ties just don't do the league any justice.
No, I would agree with you. I don't like ties. It's a little weird them taking time off, but maybe they're thinking when it gets to the back half of overtime anyway, guys are exhausted and not able to perform, and that's why we have more ties. So maybe if you take 5 minutes away, you're maybe allowing for that last 5 minutes to be as good as possible. I don't know if that's trying to look at maybe the positive end of this, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a slight one at best, because either way, you're still playing an extra quarter, so guys are going to be tired regardless after playing 4 physical quarters.
No, I agree with you. I'm just trying to find the silver lining, I guess.
Well, I tweeted this out earlier, and again, you can follow me on Twitter at mcatrillo now, not my old Twitter handle was at mcatldn. When I look at this, I think of how college football does their overtime, and I think it is very exciting. And you see, obviously, a lot of shootouts when it turns around to it. But here's my proposal for this, because if you shorten the time, like I said, I think you're going to have the ties. So if we're trying to I think, indulge player safety, but also try and find a winner and a loser and make sure you have that at the end of each game, this is my proposal, Ian. I'm going to see what your thoughts on this.
All right, hit me, Catrillo.
I'm basically doing the way the college overtime works, except each team starts with the ball at the opponent's 40, where in college football you start it back at the 25-yard line of your opponent. So you move it back.
Well, no, you start at your 25-yard line.
No, you start at your opponent's 25 in college football.
But you start in scoring range in college football.
Right.
You're proposing that they start back in the 40 on the opposite end of midfield.
No, I'm saying at the opponent's 40. So you move only back 15 yards. So that way.
I don't like that either. Just because I don't like the fact that you're guaranteeing points almost. See, that is one completion away from points. And I still like the idea of defenses having some control over this. Football is not just one side of a football. There's two sides of a football. You can't give one side just a glorious advantage. If you're going to do it that way, if we're indulging this idea, then put the ball at the 50-yard line. You put it right smack dab in the middle, and both teams have their shot.
Well, I did think about that. First I thought for your actual 25, like you would for how they do for the kickoffs now, and I'm thinking, well, again, if people don't score and this and that, then you're still prolonging the game. So then I thought midfield, where, yeah, that can give you a couple of stops, and I think that would be a good halfway point. I think to this is putting it there, or I think at the furthest at your own 40, like you mentioned, Ian. But even that, it still is kind of that gray area where defenses are playing well, which we do. You and I know both love defense, and I know Alex does too. Then you still may prolong it. So I think putting it at the opponent 40 still gives the defense. I mean, it does put a lot of pressure in the fact that they still give the defense only one stop.
I know we had this year more ties than we had in a couple of years. So the teams that tied were the Arizona Cardinals, Seattle Seahawks. That was a 6-6 game. Two really good defenses.
Redskins, Bengals in London.
Redskins, Bengals, right?
Yep, there was a tie. That was 27-27 in London. Two
teams that weren't very good. And so the game I think about more than anything is that 6-6 Arizona Cardinals, Seattle Seahawks game. The reason that game was tied was because both teams were their offensive line and quarterback play was really, really poor. Russell Wilson was a little bit banged up. The Seattle Seahawks offense in general was not very good this year. They had a great defense. I think if teams focus more on their offensive strategy and their execution offensively, there won't be as many ties. I don't think you and I can both agree that the quarterback play this past year and offensive play in general was not nearly as good as it had been in years past.
I think overall, yes, especially when you mention those two teams. I think that's a definite there. But, I mean, again, I just look at if you were to put it there at the 40, then I think you still give that defense a chance to make a stop. But then if not, the other thing I think that suffered this past year in the NFL, actually I'd argue really since they changed the extra point rules, is the kicking has not been that great from long distance anymore. So you still could have a chance. You still could have a chance of this, I guess, going long too. Now that I think about it, but I mean, either way, I still think then you still give another chance for the opponents to at least get on the field, and you still keep that rule. But then not only that too, if it comes down to a field goal to keep the game going, then it now is less of a chance to happen than maybe it did a couple of years ago when the kicking was better.
Well, here's the killer too. They're worried about player safety. We had the fastest overtime ever. First score wins, period. And, if you worry about player safety that much, then just go back to that. But now that you're asking both teams to score, now that's why it's longer at the end of the day.
Yeah, it definitely was, and you knew that was going to be a risk, but just because I've seen teams victim so many times from that old rule where, basically it comes down to the coin toss, and if you have momentum from how you maybe tied the game late in regulation of a game, you take that momentum, you go right down the field, you score the game winner, and that's it. Especially, too, just talking about the kicking situation in recent years, if you happen to have a good kicker, Well, there you go. All you have to do is get yourself in a field goal range. You put it in the perfect spot where your kicker likes it, and you win the game. I didn't think that was good either. I like that both teams do get the football. It's just difficult trying to find the happy medium of player safety and the wins and losses. But I think this might be the best. I really could see, and I would think about putting the ball in midfield too, Ian. But I'm just in all this basically, and a long point here is I want to make sure that yes, you give defenses a chance to stop at the a chance to get a stop or two, but at the same time, still make sure somebody can score somewhat quickly so you end the games faster.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I don't know. Maybe Roger Goodell, if you're listening to this, I don't know. I doubt he is. That's my
we know Roger's. We know Roger's subscribing to our Facebook page.
So the other big thing the big rule change that came out of the owners' meetings, Ian, was the excessive celebration rule has been toned down. And can I just say thank you, NFL? Yes, thank God for that.
It was the stupidest rule. We have to remember is that, yes, this game makes a lot of money. There's a lot of very powerful people associated with it. At the end of the day, it's a game. It's a game. We want these guys to be, to show excitement until we don't want them to show excitement. We want them to show passion until we tell them to not show passion. Let these guys be who they are. If Antonio Brown wants to, do a dance in the end zone, okay. If a bunch of guys want to talk, give a little, high five and do a little jig real quick, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not Joe Horn pulling a Sullivan out of your sock, or your Terrell Owens pulling out the Sharpie, everything is going to be fine.
Right, absolutely. And, the great Al Michaels has said this before. We've heightened sports so much recently with the way the media is and fantasy sports and things like that. But when it still comes down to it,
every league has their own network.
Right, exactly. But when it comes down to it, sports is still merely entertainment, and that's exactly what the great Al Michaels says. And so by having that rule in the past, where you had stricter rules on the excessive celebrations, you were taking away some of that entertainment value, which to me is really critical for the NFL to keep growing and to keep reaching out to its younger fan base who likes seeing that type of stuff. Seeing the Victor Cruz salsa dance, or the Gronk spike, or seeing when Jimmy Graham used to spike the ball over the goalpost. Those are the things that entertain the younger fans, and that's if you're the NFL, if you're Roger Goodell, who you really need to keep a lookout for and a reach out to the most, because they're your future generation of fans.
Yeah, and listen, the older generation is always going to moan and groan about, well, back in my day, they just hand the ball off to the referee. No, they didn't. You're making that up. They didn't just do that. Players back in the 70s would spike that ball as far as they could.
Absolutely. They get each other's faces, and there might have been fights afterwards. But that's how it was back in the day.
So celebrate. Be excited.
Absolutely.
Go for it. It's a game.
Now, I will say, do still keep it clean, which we've seen, talk about Antonio Brown. He's kind of been on that edge.
2 pumps.
Right. Well, I would just say maybe one, but
2 pumps. 2 pumps, you're good. 3 is ready to draw the line.
Well, but either way, I'm so glad they can do that. So players now can celebrate in groups. The ball can be used as a prop. Players can celebrate on the ground, so you can see the snow angels again during the winter, especially, I'm sure, if up in New England or wherever. So I'm glad Roger Goodell has addressed that, and it's back in the NFL seeing good celebrations again. Not have to worry about your team getting flagged either. Because that was the other issue, too, Ian, was, you're celebrating a big score, or just a score in general, but especially if it was a big one that determined the outcome and the flow of the game. All of a sudden, it's a buzzkill because you get a penalty. Exactly. It was just really annoying at best. So I'm glad this is gone now.
Me too.
So the third big thing, Ian, that came out of the NFL owners' meetings was the Super Bowl being in Los Angeles at the New Englewood Stadium.
This is like the most minor story, although I do have a slight opinion about LA having to bump back a year. They're behind schedule for their stadium, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, because of the unseasonable rainy weather that Los Angeles has had, and the NFL rule is a new stadium isn't eligible to host a Super Bowl until it's had one full season. So LA was supposed to get the Super Bowl in 2021, which would be Super Bowl 55, and now because they're going to have to move the inaugural date back to 2020 to 2021 now. It was supposed to be opened up in 2020. They now can't host that Super Bowl. So Tampa Bay gets their 10,000th Super Bowl to host. They get Super Bowl 55, and LA now gets Super Bowl 56 in 2022. So what are your thoughts on that, Ian?
LA can't do anything right. Why are we surprised?
That's true.
That's. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to look into here. It's just a story. It's just something kind of interesting to note of that they're behind schedule, and
this is an off-season story.
Well, they've been building. Yeah, it's the off-season story, but they've been building. They've been building up this franchise. I feel like for years, and they're always like, "We're 1 year away from getting it done," and their stadium's now just another year away from getting done.
I like that. That's pretty good. Maybe it is somewhat symbolic. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. There was no way that the NFL wasn't gonna get away with having LA not have a Super Bowl. So it was just going to be a matter of time. But I almost thought that I was waiting for the NFL to say that they were going to just bypass that rule about the stadium not being able to host a Super Bowl until after its first year, and all of a sudden they make an exception for LA. I was ready to pounce on the NFL for yet another hypocrisy, but I give them credit. They stuck to their guns, and Tampa gets the Super Bowl now.
Your first year, you're not ready for a Super Bowl. That's a lot.
Oh, no question. Yeah.
I mean, every news thing has issues that you have to work out that you're not going to know about until you actually start operating on a weekly basis. And so after you have that year under your belt, you're going to be a little bit more prepared. You're going to be ready to, you're going to have an idea of what you need to do for the Super Bowl. So it's the right move.
No question
LA is not going anywhere, so I think we'll be okay.
And this is going to be an interesting run when you look at the next couple of cities, Ian, that have the Super Bowl. You're going to see all the new stadiums basically coming right in the row. These next few sets of big games coming up here to celebrate the NFL championship. You have U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis with the Super Bowl this year. Then the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta that opens up this year gets Super Bowl 53. And then we'll have L.A. after that and probably Vegas sometime after that as well once that gets going.
Oh, man, the Super Bowl in Vegas.
No, yeah, I can't wait what a sight that's going to be.
That'll be...
Even in L.A., too, that would be kind of cool.
Listen, every Super Bowl venue has done a great job. I have zero complaints about any of the Super Bowls so far.
Have you seen the new floor plans and where they're getting at for that Atlanta stadium, by the way?
I have not. I actually haven't looked into it a whole lot. I'm just waiting to be excited.
It's very similar looking to what the new stadium is in Minneapolis, U.S. Bank Stadium, where the Vikings are now. It's all glass on the outside, from what I can tell. It's a huge, pretty much dome-like structure. I think that's going to have an attractable roof. I mean, just what this is becoming now. It's just a massive-looking stadium. And I just remember a couple of years ago when MetLife Stadium first opened. These stadiums now are nothing like that, and we're only talking about a couple of years apart between when these stadiums opened. I mean, it's just magnificently amazing.
Well, I mean, Heinz Field's a dinosaur now. It's almost 20 years old.
Yeah, and the Link as well opened up the year before. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, a couple years after. They were still at Veterans whenever Pittsburgh opened up Three Rivers, or Heinz Field.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Heinz was 01, and the Link was 03. That's right. Yeah. Well, anyway, so that was a couple of big things that came out of the NFL owners' meetings in Chicago last week.
You can tell we're in the offseason. We're talking about Super Bowl locations.
That's true. I mean, really, besides the draft and free agency, there really hasn't been a whole lot of big controversial stories to talk about like we've seen in years past, which I guess is good and bad for the league.
I'm not complaining about that. Yeah, that's actually been kind of nice, to be honest with you.
I'm not necessarily complaining about that either, because we can talk about more X's and O's and things like that like we have been. But
we can talk about training camp as hey, this player is not suspended. How great is that?
Exactly right. But one thing that actually is an interesting segue to come into our next topic, Ian, which is a few big names like Aaron Donald, though he's holding out for a contract situation, like Odell Beckham Jr., like Fletcher Cox for the Eagles, have been absent from the start of OTAs, which, again, we all know are voluntary. But I'm just going to go this based off of Fletcher Cox, because I know this has been really talked about, and a lot of most Philadelphia fans still and Philadelphia media are upset with the way Fletcher Cox has handled this. Is his excuse for not being at OTAs right now, again, which are voluntary, is he wanted to spend more time with his family, which I can understand because once a guy brings up family reasons, you don't know what's going on. Yeah, exactly, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with their family. You just never know about that. But then Fletcher Cox tweets out a photo of him with his family and he's holding a drink down on the beach, looks like in the Caribbean somewhere, wherever he is right now with his family. That, to me, is what you can't do. You can say, okay, you want to spend more time with your family, but then keep it quiet, be off of social media, don't be posting that kind of stuff, because this is the kind of trouble and then distraction you create for your team when it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, we all know why Fletcher Cox isn't there. We're not naive. We know why he's not there. This is the time of year where guys who are looking for contract extensions or have 1 year left, they're holding out a little bit just to kind of, not only send a message, but just to fly it out there like, hey, I'm serious about this.
But Cox already got his big payday, though, which is why some fans and media have been upset about this, though. Aaron Donald, though, it would be in that situation. You're correct about that.
Oh, that's right. Fletcher Cox did get his contract.
Yeah, he signed over. He got like a $110 million extension last year.
That's right. That was last year. You're right.
Yeah. So that's why there's a little bit of the angst and outrage in the Philadelphia side of things. But like a guy like an Aaron Donald, now that's a different story. We've seen that plenty of times before.
Which he undoubtedly deserves. I don't have a problem. This time of year, I think this time of year is more for the rookies. The veterans are going out there. They're playing catch for a little bit. They're running around a little bit. It's nothing too crazy. For the rookies, it's the most important. It's those guys getting out there and running around and getting the playbook and learning a little bit. It's OTAs for a team like Pittsburgh, New England, even Philadelphia. This is now the second year for their coach. They know what they're doing. This is just about just building some team stuff, and which doesn't. I mean, they're going to work out for a couple of days, and then they're going to have a mini camp, and then it's going to be camp. It's camps when all the real work is done. This is just little stuff.
And while I do agree,
I'm not concerned.
Right. Well, while I do agree with you, Wayne, that I'm not overly concerned about this either, and a lot of people have kind of drawn to conclusions. Well, where's his head really at? Things like that. The only criticism I would give to this.
May.
Well, true, but you still, even though the dates aren't necessarily the same each and every year, the exact dates that is, you still know the general time frame when you're going to have voluntary OTAs, when you're going to have the post-draft minicamp, and you're going to have, you're going to have the June minicamp, and when you're going to have training camp. So you still have plenty of time, especially if you don't make the playoffs, during the offseason to schedule a vacation with your family to go get away, because every guy obviously deserves that. And because it sounds like from what I'm hearing is this Cox vacation was already scheduled, and that's why he's not there. So if you're looking to schedule a vacation, you got to do it in, March, February, April.
I find it weird that he didn't know about the dates for OTAs before this vacation. I feel like Alex would probably know better than I would. I feel like that's known well in advance.
That's my point then, is when these are, or you should at least have an idea of when they are. Why are you still scheduling a vacation when you really, especially when you just got paid, still should be with your teammates?
It's back to your original point. You can say you're with your family, just don't post on social media.
Well, exactly right.
This isn't a thing if they don't. Guys have to be smart.
You're absolutely right. We're not talking about this if he doesn't post that, which is absolutely right. But I'm just saying, in general purposes, if you're an NFL player, especially in Fletcher Cox's case, when you've been paid, don't schedule a vacation when you know you're going to have camp coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
while,
like you said, Ian, this is definitely more an important time for rookies or anybody coming into a team the first year, or a team that has a first-year head coach. More critical time for them. But even so, the guys that have been there before, like a Fletcher Cox, and then for the Eagles' case, like a Brandon Graham, all the veterans, etc., this is their time for them to gel with those new guys, maybe even teach those new guys, give them some pointers, kind of show them the ropes of what the coaches who had been there for a while, what they're expecting, how they run things. Chemistry is so important in this sport, in this league. So anytime you have a chance to do that, you got to make sure you get your butt in there and do that. And Fletcher Cox obviously is not doing the case. Is not here in this case, but still.
I don't think we should make this big deal, though. I think
Right. Again,
so
I do want to make that
minuscule.
very clear. I'm just giving both sides of the argument here, and
Yeah.
more or less that he really should be there. But at the same time, I understand guys want to spend time with their vacation, but have to spend time with their families. But just don't schedule a vacation when you know camp's coming. But if somehow you do, things get mixed up. I know that happens too. Just don't post on social media, and then we don't have to talk about this.
Yeah, it's not a problem if it's not on social media. Anyway, moving on.
So now, Ian, we're going to start this new trend we're going to do here on the show, which is kind of evaluating division by division, post free agency, post the draft, and kind of get an idea of where all the teams are as we head into the season, as we get ever so closer to training camp, and kind of see where we think each team's going to go. Now, next week on the show, hopefully we'll have Alex back, and I want to go through the wins and losses because I know we haven't done that at all since the schedule came out. And for those of you that follow me on Pro Football Spot covering the Redskins,
Alex likes that.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly why, because I love making Alex mad and making him do it just to humor me. That's entertainment in itself. But secondly, I actually just did this for Pro Football Spot for my next piece for them for the Redskins schedule, so you should be on the lookout for that. That should be out the next day or so. So with that being said, we're going to start with the NFC East and kind of stay on this, and we'll stay with the Eagles here. They just signed LeGarrette Blount the other day. We'll talk about that first and what this means for the Eagles. I love the signing because we talked about in our last show 2 weeks ago how the Eagles were really thin at running back. They didn't have a whole lot of size, a lot of small guys after they drafted Donnell Pumphrey. And I thought a guy like a LeGarrette Blount or even D'Angelo Williams, who's still out in free agency, would be a good fit for the Eagles now. You get, yes, he is an older back, but those two guys, including Blount, who they just signed, are still very productive. He had Blount had over 1,600 yards rushing last year and 18 touchdowns. So he's a guy that come in, can do the work, and if he has a big year, great. Then maybe you try and bring him back, and you get your draft your new back next year, and kind of go from there. So I love the signing for the Eagles.
Well, here's the thing: which LeGarrette Blount are you getting? You getting LeGarrette Blount who played for the New England Patriots, or are you getting LeGarrette Blount who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a couple of weeks? A guy who quit on his team. That's why LeGarrette Blount wasn't signed by anyone, because I think a lot of other people had those same problems.
It's a very good point.
Now, when you're getting a guy after the draft who's looking to be on a team now, you have a little bit more leverage when it comes to bringing him in. So I like the signing for Philadelphia. It works out. It fills, I think, a little bit of a need. Not that crazy, but a guy who's was very good last year, had a lot of yards, tough runners, and led the league in touchdowns. Those are all good things that you're adding to your team, and you're not going to ask him to carry the ball 25 times. You're not asking him to be this big-time stud where you need him for 5 years. You need him to average 1,500 yards a year. No, you're going to ask him to score touchdowns and get you tough yards, and that's what LeGarrette Blount is going to be really, really good at. And I think that's a nice compliment that the Eagles are going to throw out there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is going to be a running back by committee with Blount, Sproles, Wendell, Smallwood, who I still think the Eagles might have something in. Obviously, he's still not a big back by any means, but I still think he could be a workhorse, and I want to see more from him this year. I really do. And plus, you have Donnell Pumphrey coming into the mix, too, who the Eagles really like after they drafted him in the 4th round. And,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned with Blount, the couple of times that he had with Pittsburgh went on his team, and he had the old drug issue and things like that. But I still think ultimately he learned a lot being under Bill Belichick and that Patriot system. And the Eagles, too, are a team, well, yeah, they've had their share of issues, but they still won't necessarily put up with those types of issues either off the field. So, you look at what they did to Josh Huff. Now, granted, it might have been a little bit forced because of the way they handled it originally, but they still can Josh Huff in the end. So you just hope the Eagles maybe learn from that. But at the same time, I still think Blount is going to be fine with that.
You have LeGarrette Blount that they've signed. They signed Alshon Jeffrey. They signed Torrey Smith. So they addressed the wide receiver issue that they really had. You have a guy who can contest and can make tough catches. You have a guy with a ton of speed. Torrey Smith is still ridiculously fast. Still a good player. You have a couple of other players. Jordan Matthews is still a nice player. He's not a great player. He's a nice player, though. And, you have guys that can play. And I think if you're Philadelphia, you need guys to help you take the next step. And the guys that they brought in, I think, are guys that can help them take the next step. You look at their draft. You draft Derek Barnett, you draft Sidney Jones, you draft Douglas, Matt Collins. Those are guys that are going to give you, maybe aside from Sidney Jones because he's hurt, those are guys that are going to give you snaps not only for their respective positions, but also on special teams. So I think Philadelphia did a really nice job this offseason.
Yeah, especially when you bring in the special teams factor. You mentioned Matt Collins. That's a special team, and Rasul Douglas will bring some of that too. Sidney Jones probably won't play this year. Again, I wasn't a big fan of that pick, but you just hope that if the Eagles, that he's the player that he was and he's able to recover from that type of injury, come next season.
You have a first-round pick in the second round. Life's good.
Yeah, that's true again, but he's got to still be able to come away with that. But when you look at this overall offseason, Ian, for the Eagles, they clearly had the mindset to make sure that they upgraded their weapons around Carson Wentz, because ultimately he and Doug Peterson together are what's going to determine the future of this team. There's no question about it.
Without Carson Wentz taking a step forward, this team's going to stay mediocre. And they looked really good for times last year. I think Carson Wentz is going to have a really nice year this year.
I think so too.
I think as long as, the issue I think with Philly right now is going to be their offensive line, just because Peters is getting old. And that's something that your left tackle, was it Peters?
Yeah, Jason Peters, right.
Yeah,
and
Jason Peters.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Ian, because even, let's say he has some health issues this year, but the Eagles have done, I think, a nice job in lowering his workload and just making sure that he's ready to be on the field week one and stay that way like he did last year. But the Eagles still have developed really a lot of good depth. I think this is a big year for Isaac Seumalo and seeing what he can do, whether he starts at guard and or at center, depending on what happens with Jason Kelce. He already was getting first-team reps these past couple of days to begin OTAs for Allen Barbery, who already has a calf injury, which I didn't know how that happened. It must have happened during the offseason. So, and that's at left guard. And you still have Halapuli Vaitai, who got some time last year and I think can maybe gel into something possibly, and he is also versatile. So they have guys in there that can do the job, and I think regardless of what happens to Jason Peters, him alone, the Eagles have some good depth on the offensive line where I think that can be a lot better this year. And of course, too, that Lane Johnson is able to keep himself clean off the field, because I think he is one of the biggest keys to the Eagles' offense this year as well.
Oh, it wasn't a surprise. Whenever he left the lineup last year, the offensive line went down significantly. And so
the whole offense did, because the Eagles didn't run the ball as well until a couple of last games of the year when he came back, and just you saw all the shuffling that the Eagles had to do, and it really hurt them last year. They only won one or two games once Lane Johnson went out week 4 and he had the 10-game suspension. So he is really, really critical, and that brings me to my next point. When I look at Doug Peterson in his second year and how critical this is obviously going to be for him to not only win over the fan base, but continue to win over his team and know that he's got something going here with Carson Wentz, his guy that he drafted last year, is some of the more impressive games the Eagles had last year, like the Vikings win, the Atlanta win, the Giants win late in the year when they almost stole one in Baltimore last year. They ran the football effectively, and Doug Peterson stuck with it. And those were also, too, ironically, 2 or 3 of Ryan Matthews' really best games of the year. The Falcons game, Ryan Matthews ran for just over 200 yards. He ran for 160-something yards in the Baltimore game. So,
well, if you look at the LeGarrette Blount signing, that's dedication to it right there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So now I just hope that now that Peterson has his go-to back for the most part, it's still going to be running back by committee, but the fact that he has a bruiser now to replace Ryan Matthews, who will eventually be seeing the door fairly soon, I would think, in LeGarrette Blount, I better be seeing you run the football effectively and be a run-first type of offense, because when you saw that success last year. When Peterson says he went through all the games last year and he's going to constantly evaluating himself, that to me should have been the number one thing to stick out to him is, hey, every time I ran the football, we won games, or we gave ourselves a chance to win, and not when Carson Wentz is throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game.
Well, and his defense for those games, the running backs were really injured, and the wide receivers are dropping passes, so it wouldn't have mattered what they did those games.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few things that didn't go his way either, but still, even when you had Ryan Matthews in the game, there were still plenty of times last year when you had him available and you still didn't stick to the run, and it really hurt them. It really cost them.
I agree.
Now,
so let's move to a team that you cover. So the Washington Redskins, their offseason has been Washington Redskins-like.
Yes, but I think there are a couple of underlying moves that people aren't looking. Everyone's going to look at the dysfunction as they should because of the way everything happened with how Bruce Allen kicked everybody out and with Scott McLaughlin out, all those guys. But they still made some decent moves. They bring it. I think the best free agency move they brought in was Zach Brown at inside linebacker, and he's probably going to be one of your starters there week one, probably with Will Compton. And I thought they had a pretty good draft overall. Especially, I think this Redskins defense has a chance to do something to maybe I think be the vocal point of this team.
The only thing I don't like is that Ryan Anderson pick. Just thought that was a major reach in round 2. There were so many better players there.
I like the pick, but
I know,
I know we're on opposite
ends
here.
Athletic enough. You can like a guy because he played at Alabama and he had some production, but not great production. Yeah, I mean, he didn't have anything that was going to make you go, okay, we have something here. He's a guy who tries real hard, but does he have some sort of factor that can make him a good player, a special player in the NFL? And hey, maybe I'm wrong. I said the same thing about Le'Veon Bell coming out of school, and evidently I was wrong. But the Jonathan Allen pick, the Fabian Moreau pick, and the Samaje Perine pick, really like all of those picks for the Washington Redskins. I think those addressed a lot of problems, and I think they helped them out. But if they don't sign Kirk Cousins, then this is all for naught. It doesn't matter.
All right, as you know, we're just talking about this with the Eagles. Ultimately, it's still going to come back to Carson Wentz's growth and development. Here with the Redskins, it's the exact same thing. And I said this as part of my piece when we evaluated the schedule. I won't give it out because I want people to read it. Obviously, is because of yes, they made some of these nice moves that like they did in the draft and with the Zach Brown signing and etc. But with the still some dysfunction that you have in the front office, with still an unsolved quarterback situation in Kirk Cousins, just where they just overall as still though as a team, there's still some question marks offensively. You're not going to be successful ultimately, and the Redskins still have a really tough schedule this year too. When you look at it,
yeah, I mean, it's the Giants, the Eagles,
and everybody in the division's got to play the AFC West and the NFC West. I mean, it's not an easy schedule for the Redskins this year.
I think every team in the NFC East all got better.
I would agree.
Except for Washington.
I slightly disagree with you.
They moderately got. They improved.
And I don't know if necessarily Dallas got better, per se, especially defensively. They lost 5 starters that they weren't able to retain. Now, offensively, they're still going to be potent.
So, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe Dallas didn't have it. But, listen, Philadelphia and New York did. They were ready for the arms race. I agree with that. They went out, they drafted well, and they brought in some key free agents. So, I just don't know if Washington is, they're fighting with their own players internally rather than getting ready for this season, which is going to be the NFC East might be the toughest division of football again this year.
Well, I still think it's still the AFC West that's the toughest division, but the NFC East is definitely right there. And I also think too, I'm very intrigued, and we'll talk about this on a later show. I'm really intrigued by the NFC South. I think that's a really stacked division too, because I love what Tampa Bay's done this offseason. And Carolina, I think could be better this year. And Atlanta, obviously, is still going to be very strong. So I think that's going to be a really good division to look out for, too.
I think that there's a very realistic chance that you see it either the NFC East or the NFC South. One of those two divisions is going to have 3 teams in the playoffs.
I wouldn't be surprised by that one bit. I think the NFC East might have more of a chance of that happening than the NFC South, but I mean, I could be wrong. Because I still don't know a lot about Carolina right now. I think Carolina and the Eagles are very similar in the fact that there's a whole lot of question marks and really don't know how this is going to go for both teams.
The only thing I think more NFC East than South, just as you, is that we've always seen teams in the South as super talented and they take huge steps backwards. There's the season where they think they should be really good. The Saints have done it. Carolina did it. I don't think Atlanta's going to because they've added some really good pieces, and we'll get to that in a few weeks, I'm sure. But I just think this NFC East is so good with the Giants and the Cowboys. The Cowboys still are stacked offensively. They have a great offensive line. We talk about it all the time. And they have some guys coming back, and it's all Dak Prescott now. I don't have to worry about the Tony Romo effect, so that piece of drama is gone. I just think that and the Eagles the Eagles were a really good team in the first half of the year. They were young, and now they have a year under their belt, and they'll be ready to rock. And Carson Wentz is going to be ready to rock and roll for an entire 16-game schedule. He's not going to have to worry about, boy, the North Dakota State, we did this. He's now a professional player. He's had it for a year. He'll be ready to go.
Well, here's the thing now with the Eagles is the Eagles were two things though with the Eagles were they have for me need to show to take the next step. One, they got to be better on the road. They were atrocious last year. They were 1-7. That lone win was the first road win of the year against Chicago. Secondly, for Carson Wentz, obviously you want to see growth in his mechanics and things like that. It looks like he's done that. He's had a good start to the offseason and practice for that in the OTAs. But secondly, I want to see him go into those clutch situations like we saw so many times at North Dakota State and lead your team down the field to a game-winning or game-tying score. We only saw that really one time last year with Baltimore, and they still lost because they decided to go for two at the end of the game. And they barely hung on for the Giants, so the defense had to make a play at the end. So really, I only look at one game where Carson Wentz came in the clutch and led the Eagles down the field for a big score that almost won him, gave him a chance to win the game. So I need to see more from him this year too.
I think you will. I think his rookie year he played better, I think, than everyone thought he was.
Oh, no question. Like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from Carson Wentz. I think he had pretty much as good a year as any rookie quarterback could have had with everything that he had around him. But I'm just saying these are the next steps he has to take.
It is. And the best part about what the Eagles did is not only I know we've talked about it ad nauseum, but the fact that they were able to get who they believed to be their franchise quarterback.
Well, I mean, that was a different story in itself.
For a first-round pick.
Absolutely.
And you still get Derek Barnett. I mean,
yeah,
that worked out. That certainly worked out.
Things had to go their way for that to happen. Meaning Minnesota pretty much had to miss the playoffs, and they did. Minnesota missed the playoffs because they had a ton of injuries that didn't go their way. That ended up going the Eagles' way, and the Eagles got the 14th pick. It was only a difference of 2 picks.
Anyway, so we had mentioned the Giants already. I don't know if there's a whole lot to mention with the Giants other than I think as of right now, even with the Cowboys, I'm going to say that the Giants are probably the favorite to win.
I agree.
In the NFC East. Evan Ingram, Dalvin Tomlinson, Wayne Gallman, Avery Moss. I mean, those are guys. I mean, they got Davis Webb in there too. I'm huge crazy about that pick. But bringing in Brandon Marshall, the only issue I have with the Giants right now is their offensive line stinks. Everything else is ready to play at a championship level, and if Eric Flowers can somehow find a way to make it happen, great. But he was terrible and just playing awful last year.
This is a big year for him too.
But with the players that they have, Eli Manning's still a good player, but when he's getting crushed every play, he doesn't look like a good player. So, if this Giants offensive line can play better, the sky is the limit for this team because who do you cover? You got to cover Odell Beckham. You got to cover Brandon Marshall. You have to cover Sterling Shepard. You have to cover Evan Ingram now. Wayne Gallman's really good coming out of the backfield. He's a heck of a runner. You have Paul Perkins. It's like Pittsburgh a little bit where you don't know who to cover and who not to because you have to make a decision.
Well, the only thing I'll say, two things for the Giants offensively this year. One, when you look at the Marshall and Odell Beckham Jr. combination, while yes, that can and will be dangerous and tough to stop, the only thing I would say is when things are not going great, we've seen how mentally untough Odell Beckham Jr. has been. And we've seen the issues that Brandon Marshall had with the Jets. So you have two guys that get emotional, and both are guys that want the ball and have been divas in the past. And when things aren't going well offensively for the Giants, I can see those two butting heads very, very quickly, which really could derail them on and off the field.
I think that Brandon Marshall, I like Brandon Marshall. A lot of people give Brandon Marshall crap. I think Brandon Marshall has come such a long way in his career and where he's at now. Listen, he was playing for the Jets last year. I would have been mad too.
I mean, yeah, I get it. It's not a good situation, but what I'm still saying is, and even when Marshall was with the Broncos and the Bears.
Yeah, but he's a different player now than he was then. And I think this was a move. You bring in a guy like Brandon Marshall, who, yeah, he gets emotional. Yeah, he's not afraid to get after guys, and that's not a bad thing. especially in that receiver room right now where they're all young and fairly immature.
Right, but there's still a fine line which he's crossed many times before, and so has Odell Beckham Jr. So that's again is probably my biggest concern for the Giants offensively.
Yeah, but on paper, I don't think there's any disagreement of how talented this team is, and we didn't talk about defensively.
Well, yeah, defensively they're set up, and we saw that last year.
Worked.
Yeah,
and they're going to be something else. They brought some guys in that were just incredible.
Which, when you look at it in recent years, Ian, when you've seen teams make so many free agent signings, especially on the defensive side of the ball, those signings really haven't come to fruition. But the Giants somehow were able to gel that together. I think a lot of credit goes to Steve Spagnuolo.
He's a great defensive coach, and that's why the Giants are as good as they are. I think they have if their offensive line can solidify, they have a really good chance of making a push this year to maybe even participating in the Super Bowl. I really think that their talent's there.
I wouldn't to say I would not be surprised, but the only other thing the last point I'll make about them, and then we'll move on to the AFC North, is this kind of goes back to tying into what we were talking about with the offensive line's play. Is the Giants' running game was not good last year at all, and frankly, I don't know how they won some of the games that they did. And again, it comes back to the offensive line, but we still didn't. You saw some flashes with Paul Perkins last year, and I think he can have a better year than he did last year. So I think that could be better. But those are the two big things with the Giants: is their running game, can that improve, which goes to the offensive line, and making sure everybody stays cool on the receiving core with Brandon Marshall and Odell Beckham Jr.
And I think Wayne Gallman helps that, because with Wayne Gallman, the way that they played at Clemson, you can do kind of the same things in New York. You keep the team spread out. You can't play the run if you're in diamond nickel trying to defend 3 or 4 wide receivers. And that's what essentially Evan
It could be a way,
is.
Definitely. I would agree with that 100%. But it's
if
still,
you're able to spread out the defenses, then Paul Perkins and Wayne Gallman are able to find space regardless of how crappy your offensive line is. So if you're the Giants, you're trying to think outside of the box in a year where the offensive line prospects stunk, especially tackle.
Yeah, definitely. And that was some of their bigger needs, too, where they needed that.
Tackles were the issue. I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't really studied their interior guys, but interior guys are a little bit easier to find than tackles. And their tackles haven't been very good. And maybe they'll try to adjust that next offseason. But as of right now, I like everything that they did. Anyway, moving on to the AFC.
Yeah, AFC North now. We'll start with the Steelers. And they've had an interesting couple of weeks. They've let go of Ladarius Green, which to me really wasn't a surprise. He was such a huge disappointment. Just can't stay healthy.
It was a surprise because everyone, all intents and purposes, we all thought he was healthy. We hadn't heard anything to the contrary. And the fact that he came in and failed his physical was the end of a very frustrating.
Right. But see, that was, to me, how this ended was the definition of, I think, how the Steelers handled this, and as far as like internally and externally to the fans and to the media, is nobody really ever knew what kind of shape this guy was in. So to me, you just never really you could see it going either way. You really could have, and it went the negative way, unfortunately, for Pittsburgh.
I don't even think Pittsburgh knew what was going on.
That's my point.
And I think that, and if you're a player trying to sell yourself, you're always going to you're telling teams, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good to go. And you might believe that, but your body's telling you something totally different. And it's a shame. Ladarius Green, when he was on the field, was a big asset for Pittsburgh. He had 100 yards, and he was a big-time player down the seam. He opened things up. And I know I, for one, was looking forward to seeing Martavis Bryant on the outside and Ladarius Green running up the seam and, Antonio Brown running those mid routes and Le'Veon underneath. I was thinking, how do you stop that? And, losing Ladarius Green for me is just, it's frustrating because it didn't work out. So I'm not frustrated at the player or even the team. I'm frustrated that it didn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you still, when you look at Pittsburgh's offense, they still have so much to dominate that you have to stop. And this might be just me, Ian. I'm going to get your feelings on this, but I like what Jesse James can do, both from a blocking standpoint and from a receiving standpoint. And I think that he can stand in there and do the job next year, because I know there's a lot of angst among Steelers Nation of how they feel about him going forward.
He did last year. He did enough last year, and we'll see how he continues to grow. I don't think he is he's a poor man's Heath Miller. I think that's the best compliment for him. He just needs to go do his job. His job is to not try to be Ladarius Green or to try to be the best player on the team he has to know his role. If he can go out there and play at a high level for him, then Pittsburgh's going to be pretty good. If he can make some big catches, which he's done in the past, then great. If he can make a couple of nice blocks, then great. I still think, though, that tight end is an area that Pittsburgh needs to address next offseason. I wanted them so badly to do it this year, and for me, it's frustrating also knowing how good this tight end class was. And, Josh Dobbs, I get it. They wanted to get a quarterback, but
you could have waited, especially with this quarterback class, I think, too.
Yeah, and I would have been okay if you had waited. And especially, honestly, the long snapper. I know the long snapper is almost kind of justified now because Greg Warren got cut. But bring in a tight end. If you're going to lose Ladarius Green, so it's Jesse James, Xavier Grimble, and David Johnson are your tight ends right now, and that's not scaring anybody.
No, definitely not. And so Grimble can't even hang on to the football in most cases. I mean, you saw in some of those games last year.
Yeah.
But, I mean, defensively, when you look at for Pittsburgh, Ian, that front seven, I think is pretty solid, as good as any front seven you can see. And just the secondary now that Artie Burns has a year under his belt, I think he can be better. And you see how everything else plays out there, and then that part of the defense.
Yeah, as long as the pass rush can get better, they have to get home. The outside linebackers have to play well. Bud Dupree has to build upon what he did. James Harrison has to continue to be James Harrison. And T.J. Watt has to show something this year. He's got to get pressure after the quarterback, because if you're Pittsburgh, your secondary made some big strides last year, and they're going to continue to make strides. If you can't get after the quarterback, it doesn't matter. You're going to get killed.
Right. And by the way, James Harrison, I've confirmed this, and I'm sure you have too, Ian, more than I have. He's just not human. Did you see that Twitter post he had the other day? Benching 675? Are you serious?
Well, how about his hip thrust that he was doing?
Unbelievable.
And he had the bar. I don't know how much weight was on there.
My hips literally shattered into pieces just watching him do that.
I do that without weight.
Yeah.
And it's enough.
It's incredible.
He did more weight with his hips than I could ever dream to do in a bench press or a squat.
Yeah.
No, he's not human. No, you're correct.
Okay. There you go.
Whenever James Harrison wants to retire, which might be when he's 60, he might retire from the NFL at normal, American retirement age.
Would not be surprised by that. And you know what? I can see him being really productive again next year. I really do.
Yeah, I think that him playing well is not out of the realm of possibility.
When we look at the other set of the side here for the AFC North, Ian, I think Baltimore had a nice offseason, and this is critical for them this year because I think John Harbaugh is on the hot seat now, and if they don't have a good year, he's gone.
I don't know. I don't want to go that far because he's still a really good coach. But you know what? The issue that Baltimore had last year was just a genuine lack of playmakers, and I don't know if they did really anything to address that. I know they wanted to get better defensively, and let's look at their draft here real quick. Marlon Humphreys, who a lot of people have as one of the top cornerbacks in the draft.
I liked him too for the most part.
Athletic. Tyus Bowser from Houston. He's going to be a really, really good player. Chris Wormley from Michigan. Really good player. Tim Williams. Probably it could have been a first-round pick if he didn't have the off-the-field issues. You're getting him in the third round. Awesome. Those are four guys that are going to help you year one for your defense. Not to mention they drafted a couple of guys last year for their defense as well. So defensively, Baltimore is saying, listen, we built this team in the past on great defense, and we built the offense to come along after that. It worked for us then. We got to see if it'll work for us now. I think that losing Steve Smith for them was huge. I think they need Max Williams to have a nice year this year. He really hasn't come along the way that I thought he would.
He's been a big disappointment too. I agree.
And I don't. The issue with Baltimore is we're going to have this great defense, but we're only going to score 6 points a game.
Yeah, you still can't win like that. Yeah. And especially, too, when you look at the division, you have Pittsburgh and even some part of Cincinnati's offense that are explosive, and you have to be able to keep up with.
Cleveland got better this offseason.
They did.
Isn't going to just be a one-win team this year.
I'll give them that.
They should be a team that's at least competitive in games. I'm not saying they're going to win a ton, but they're competitive.
I wouldn't surprise if they're in the 5 to 6 win range this year.
Yeah, hey,
I would not be surprised by that. Maybe.
Let's jump to Cleveland real quick. They brought in a couple of offensive linemen. Their draft was really good. They had some, which it should have been, you're picking that high and you have that many picks. They brought in some really good players. They brought in some guys who are going to be, I think, major contributors this season. And Cleveland could end up being pretty good, especially if all of these guys work out.
Down the road, though, not this year, though. I think they're a ways away. I think they're at least 2-3 years away from being a playoff team.
I don't want to go playoff team. They got to prove me that they can win.
That's what I'm saying. I think at least 2 to 3 years because they still don't have their quarterback situation fixed.
Well, they don't, but you draft a guy like Kaiser in the second round, a guy who has first-round talent, and now you're going to get him coached up, and you find out what he's made of.
See, I don't agree about that. I thought Kaiser was still a reach because I thought Kaiser was a third-round pick at best. He's got his mechanics are pretty much there. He's got a strong arm. There was no question about it. But I just look at he had a ton of inaccuracy issues last year and really his entire career with Notre Dame. As I watched every single game they had this year, and his decision making is atrocious. It's awful. There are too many times where he tries to fit that in the window, and he's not focusing. He's not reading defenses.
Well, who's a better coach though? Jackson or Green? Or Kelly.
I would like to think Hugh Jackson, but a 1-15 season doesn't give me that much confidence either right now.
Well,
quarterback coach.
Had more talent than Cleveland last year.
Right. As far as maybe grooming him,
Notre Dame was terrible.
Yeah, as far as grooming him and so forth, I definitely give that edge to Jackson. But when we're talking about overall head coach and giving in-game decision things like that, it's kind of a toss-off to me right now because a 1-15 season doesn't tell me much.
Well, the important thing is he's a
regardless
second-round pick. He was a late second-round pick. So if you get something out of him, great. It worked out. You got your franchise quarterback in the second round. There's been teams that have done that.
I know.
If it doesn't work out, it was a second-round pick.
Right.
What? It didn't work out. You move on. Or, hey, let's say if you're Cleveland and you have 2 more picks in next year's draft, right in the number 1 in the first round. Let's say Deshaun Kaiser comes in. He's a total dud. He's terrible. He can't play. There's a number of quarterbacks coming out this year that I haven't started on, but early word is that I should be enthusiastic about what I see.
Right, but again, this all comes down to what we were talking about earlier with some of the other teams around the league. It comes down to quarterback. And let's face it, there's a reason why that, number 1, they've been the way they've been the last couple of years record-wise, and then 2, why they've had 26 different starting quarterbacks since '99.
It's because they can't find one. And you know what? Cleveland is just, they're like the little brother that can never do anything right. But with this draft, they think they got it right. So we'll see.
But now they have to prove it. And I'm also very curious, too, of how they work in Julius Peppers. I think that could be a good system for him to be in and fit and be that hybrid guy.
Julius Peppers signed with Cleveland?
Not Julius Peppers. Jabril Peppers.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jabril Peppers.
Okay,
yeah.
I was like, I didn't think that happened. I think he went back to Carolina.
He did go back to Carolina. You are correct about that. Jabril Peppers. I'm curious where he fits there defensively and what they do with him on special teams. And maybe even goal line situation, too.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in the Wildcat just for him. For goal line, short yardage, and things like that.
As bad as Cleveland, you're willing to do just about anything to win.
Yeah.
So everything is on the table.
Especially week 1.
Who's week 1?
Don't they play Pittsburgh?
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't really paid attention much to the schedule yet.
Look it up.
Hey, I've been off since the draft. I haven't done a whole lot of football stuff since the draft, I've been, taking my time a little bit. One last team in the AFC North. I thought the Bengals were a team that got way worse this offseason.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, they have the talent, the explosiveness, but defensively, I don't think they got any better. They're still slow. And offensively, they lost a lot of their offensive line. So you can't protect Andy Dalton, which was a problem last year, and your defense is another year slower. So, way to go, Marvin Lewis.
Yeah, Steelers are in Cleveland week 1.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll see.
Exactly. But yeah, no question. Cincinnati, it starts from the top down. We're talking about this with Washington. Cincinnati's probably right there too. Is they keep bringing a guy, Marvin Lewis, who can't coach. I shouldn't say he can coach you in the regular season, but he can't coach you in the postseason. And Andy Dalton, there's not getting any better either quarterback.
I think winning in the postseason is as much about the players, is more about the players than it is the coach.
Right, and the quarterback Andy Dalton takes as much of the blame as Marvin Lewis does, but still, you got to make a change at some point here. I mean, he's almost on getting on Jeff Fisher's status, which is a status that you really don't want to be in if you're an NFL coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really.
But they're willing to take all of these risks with players, and it's so funny.
Joe Mixon's the biggest one when you think about it.
Well, Marvin Lewis said that he thought that the retraction of the celebration will set a bad example for young players. I'm like, Vontaze Burfict, Pac-Man Jones,
yeah,
Joe Mixon.
That was probably the stupidest thing you could ever said. Really? Look at your franchise right now? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a ridiculous thing to say, especially for a guy whose teams have clearly had issues with maturity.
Clearly, yeah. Definitely have been.
Vontaze Burfict has never had a celebration problem, guys. It's been everything else.
Exactly, yeah. Like costing you a playoff game against your division opponent.
Yeah.
Nothing major, but I agree.
Anyway.
I can see Cincinnati taking a step back. I think when you look at the AFC North, Ian, it's a two-horse race, as it usually I shouldn't say it's usually been, as I think the NFL would like to see it, as one of the better rivalries right now in the game. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, they're going to battle for the division, but I give the upper hand to Pittsburgh, obviously, by somewhat of a significant margin.
I think Pittsburgh, I think this is their division to lose this year. As of May, what's today's date? May 20th. This comes out the 26th. As of May 26th, I think Pittsburgh is the leader on paper.
Yeah, I agree. It's still going to be an interesting division, definitely, and so is the NFC East too. But I think Pittsburgh is the clear favorite in this case when it comes to the AFC North. So next week we'll try to do two more divisions. We'll try to do the NFC South next and the AFC West, and then we'll go from there, as well as any other storylines that pop up during the week as we go through the offseason here in the NFL. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. Ian, pleasure to be back. We'll talk next week, man.
Always. Yep, I'll catch you later, man.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Football Friday podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at FFPodcast1. That's at FFPodcast1. You can follow Ian on Twitter at B104_Hunter. And I am on Twitter at MCatrillo. Make sure to give us all a follow on Twitter. And the YouTube page where you can find all of our show archives is at Football Friday. Catch us on YouTube. That's going to do it for this week's edition. For Ian Hunter, I'm Matt Catrillo. We'll talk to you next time.